Welcome to the Wine Podcast. I'm Chris Wofford.
I'm Cheryl Stanley.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be popping some corks and talking about natural wines. Cheryl Stanley is a lecturer at the Nolan School of Hotel Administration. She's also course author of several online courses on wine that we will be talking about later as we get into it. So natural wines is the topic today. Cheryl, why are they trending? What's going on out there?
Oh my gosh, Chris. Wow. Well, they're unique. They're different. Mm-hmm. They create an experience, whether it's good or bad. That's all in the eye of the person enjoying the wines. Mm-hmm. And I think it's as people discover and begin their wine journey, they're curious and they want to try so many different wines. And these natural wines, and I use air quotes, these natural wines are an extension of that curiosity.
What is natural wine? Tough to define.
Oh, yes. And I had to write some notes down because I needed to stay on topic.
Okay.
Because natural wines is a huge conversation in the wine industry right now.
Yeah.
Because all wine is natural, right? Wine is not created by humans. There is human contact, but it is a natural product created by Mother Nature, and Dr. Patrick McGovern from UPenn wrote an amazing book all about the history of wine and its natural product. But I want to actually read the Oxford Companion of Wines definition of natural wine.
Do it.
Because that is really like one of the wine Bibles of the wine world. Grapes are typically grown by small-scale independent producers. Grapes are handpicked from sustainable, organic, or biodynamic vineyards, so going into the farming practices. Mm-hmm. Wine is fermented with no added yeast, i.e. native yeast. No additives are included in fermentation, such as yeast nutrients, and little to no sulfites are added. And it's interesting because when I started learning about natural wines, it was just no sulfur added. That was what was considered a natural wine. And now there's so much more that kind of get grouped into this natural wine category.
And just to back up real quick, so what do sulfites do for wine?
Sulfites are an antimicrobial. Mm-hmm. So they will kill off any unwanted bacteria, and they can be added at different times during the winemaking process. So it could be added in the very beginning when the grapes are coming in to kill any yeast that's on the outside of the grape skins, mm-hmm. or it could be added during the fermentation process, further along in the method of production. It could also stop fermentation, leaving residual sugar.
What about the variability of those native yeasts? That's a big variable, potentially.
Well, potentially, yes, because some native yeast can't handle higher alcohol, so they, die off at 5%. And then you have what is oftentimes considered stuck fermentation. And we think about styles of natural wine. One of these styles is glue. Kind of sounds like glug glug out of the bottle. And those are specifically low alcohol wines, traditionally red. Now they're white, rosé, orange. Color of the rainbow kind of thing, but they're lower alcohol wines. And so, and this is where it gets into human intervention and winemaker intervention in the winemaking process. Traditionally, people say, or talk about more commercially made wines, a winemaker might add certain yeast strains, whereas these native yeasts would be just au naturel, or even what's in the winery. Within the winery, that can take part in the air that you breathe.
What else about process and production is involved? Labor intensivity, I'm thinking about. Cost of operation. If you've got a relative hands-off approach, you would think this is economical to produce, or is it quite the opposite? Is it a little more challenging because of that?
I think it depends. No black or white answer.
Got it.
With hand harvesting, that definitely is labor intensive, and where you are in the world will increase that. Mm-hmm. If you are a natural wine producer and you take the hands-off, no intervention, even in the vineyard, that can cause challenges because, say, for example, you get mold or mildew in the vineyards, and you're not able to spray. Now, with sustainable practices, organics, and biodynamic farming techniques, which have very strict rules and not sustainable, but organic and biodynamic have
Yes.
very strict farming techniques that can, the winemaker has some options to use if they follow those.
That's right.
winemaking
Biodynamics
practices.
very labor intensive. There's a whole process with the, microbial management is its own thing just alone.
Yes, with bringing in animals to eat the weeds to then create fertilization or fertilizer.
Yeah, yeah.
And spraying the quartz crystals on the vines. It is very labor intensive, and it
Sure.
takes a lot of knowledge in order to do it correctly, and then also documentation too.
Great. Let's talk about styles.
Oh, boy.
Let's talk about output. We're doing a tasting today. We've got 5 different wines, a little bit all over the place, but in the best way. Let's talk about broadly, like for the uninitiated. How do we think about the styles of natural wine?
Sure. Well, and this is what's fun, but also can be challenging for a consumer, is since there is no government definition, what is a natural wine? And we already talked about that, but kind of WSET, the Wine Spirits Education Trust, refers to natural wine as an ethos, from the winemaker. But now we're looking in the market, even subcategories. So the glue that I talked about, those low alcohol, oftentimes referred to as juicy wines that you can drink easily. They're not high tannin, usually high acid, and oftentimes made using carbonic maceration. And then you have the orange skin contact / amber. And that's where you are in the world will, a winemaker will use a certain term over another. So orange wine here in the United States, we know that has been skin contact. It might just say skin contact on the label. It
Right.
might say Ramato
Yes.
for Italy. And, all of that knowing, or amber. We have to think about amber too, having the juice sit on the skins, extracting color. And then we also have pet-nats. And that's going to be really fun because we're trying 2 different pet-nats, pétillant naturel.
What is that about?
So that is the ancestral method. And the ancestral method has been around for hundreds of years.
In production of champagne, bubbles?
Bubbles.
Okay.
Bubbles. And it's bottling the wine while it's going through fermentation. And some producers will disgorge that yeast at the end. Others will not. And so that's why sometimes you'll get some funky chunkies down in the bottom of the bottle.
Yeah. Prices. So let me just say. So I went to Cellar Door in Ithaca, New York. They set us up really nicely. I went in with the list you gave me and said, "Set me up with these here." We had a couple pet nats on there. We had a Pinot Grigio from Italy. We were unable to identify one and come away with one, but a little bit pricey. So you'll see as we go through each of these wines, once we dig in, the cost of these are at minimal $25 a bottle or thereabouts. And I'd asked you, is there any opportunity for bargain wine, everyday chuggers? And the answer was sort of.
Sort of.
Yeah.
I should say, more challenging to find that in the market. I've seen a couple for $12, but very, very few. If you're in Europe, of course, the pricing will be different. Even here in the United States, different states have different tax laws. So you can find various price points. But exactly as you encountered at the Cellar Door, you're talking $25 and up. Even $100. And really it's supply and demand. There is a high demand for these wines, especially at, wine bars, or, you go to restaurants and we only serve natural wines, a very curated list. And because of that, you'll find some that are over 100.
What do you think about digging into some of these? Let's go through in sequence.
Sure.
And do some tasting. So we have wine number 1. We'll see it on the wine cam there. Is the Chemin de Bessac Botelleux. How's my pronunciation there?
Good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, not bad.
Well, and this wine is fun. Well, just looking at the glasses themselves. And this is when for those of you who are going to be trying these wines at another time or tasting them along with us, you see we're so used to that brilliant color of wine where it's super reflective. You have the blind tasting standards, star bright. These are not star bright.
No, you can't see completely through any of these.
Right.
Really.
And this is where, as a consumer, it can be challenging because if you don't know that this is in that natural wine category, you pick up the bottle and you're like, something's wrong here.
Yep.
Something's going on. But this is just a stylistic preference of the winery. And this is fun. This wine is specifically from the Languedoc-Roussillon area.
What kind of grapes are in this?
Viognier and Roussanne, I believe, from the importer's website. And again, bottled during fermentation. But oftentimes you'll see with pet-nats that they're not cork closed. They're actually closed with a crown cap. And this is where, again, you can kind of go down. Crown caps, are they recyclable? No. Are they sustainable? Not as much, but a cork might not necessarily be able to handle
Okay, I was
wine.
gonna say it's about efficacy and working.
Exactly.
Keeping the wine in the bottle.
Exactly.
Okay.
And keeping the bubbles. I mean, when
Yes.
you're buying a pet-nat, you want a wine with bubbles, which is going to give you texture, as well as you have some texture from the unfine unfiltered.
All right, let's give this one a taste. Let
Yeah.
me know what you think.
Well, it's fun because when we opened up the initial bottle, the bubbles were present, but they weren't out of control. And you'll see this if you drink a lot of pet-nats, that the bubble situation can vary based off of the amount of sugar in the wine, the method of production, disgorging, and whatnot.
Okay.
Well, cheers.
Cheers, Cheryl.
So what I think, okay, color and having it be unfiltered aside, I get some kind of apple skin. There is oxidized apple a little bit.
Yes.
But also you get some peach and floral notes. Knowing Viognier and Roussanne Viognier being a very aromatic grape variety, not getting as much of that intense white flower as I would assume from other wines, but that's okay. Again,
How would you talk about the acidity in this wine? How would you describe it?
I would say acidity is medium, but it has scrubbing bubbles. And with that carbon dioxide, the carbon dioxide cleanses your palate.
Yeah. Sure
And
does.
this is why this wine would be a really fun wine to pair with food. And you can up the intensity of the food because this wine has a lot of texture. Do you like it?
I like it quite a bit. The oxidized apples is the thing that's really just sticking with me. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, but okay, some people think I'm a little weird with my apples, but it's not Granny Smith. It's not green apple.
No.
It is, and it's not necessarily even red delicious. It's more of like a Gala honey crisp pine. There is a ripeness to fruit, but that makes complete sense from the growing region, too. But this wine, and this is where, you think about the different certification bodies like Court of Master Sommeliers or Wine Spirits Education Trust, and you're blind tasting wine, you're evaluating the site. And you're also saying, does it smell clean? Does it smell faulty? And some natural wine producers tend to lean towards what is perceived in the mass wine world as faults. But them, it's not a fault. It adds character to their wine. And this wine, I think, is fairly clean. You're getting that fruit to it. Okay, this sounds, again,
This is wild.
When I taste wine, sometimes it has a little bit of a strawberry shortcake plastic doll note to it.
I know the doll.
But then like Haribo candies, but the wine is dry. The aromatics are so ripe, and I think the carbon dioxide in the wine is also allowing those aromatics to come out without having to give it a big swirl.
It's lovely, really enjoyable. So, at first blush. What would you pair with this? Where would you go with this?
A bean stew.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Something with a little bit of heartiness to it, but not overpowering.
Right, and they're not going to fight each other.
No,
That's
exactly
ultimately what we're talking about.
They're gonna complement between the bodies and the sparkling, the carbon dioxide in the wine. I think it would be really good.
All right, let's keep things brisk.
Okay.
Let's hit number 2. The second wine is called Macari Sparkling Horses Cabernet Franc. Cab Franc did not make our list for recommended bottles that people should buy, but nevertheless, Cellar Door said you must try this because it fits the bill and it would be really interesting.
Well, and I think it's another wonderful expression of a pet-nat.
Yeah.
So this pet-nat was cloudy, whereas this pet-nat is not. And this is a rosé.
It's a beautiful rosé.
Exactly. And it's that wonderful kind of dark salmon color. And one thing I'd like to make note are the bubbles. The bubbles are much higher. There's much more carbon dioxide in this wine.
Yep.
And what's fun, too, about rosé pet-nats, you just see between these two wines various spectrum of cloudy to clear and brilliant. So, and pet-nat is more in reference to the method of production. Yeah.
This looks like a sparkling rosé.
Exactly, and it smells like one too. It has that bright, juicy red cherry and strawberry notes, and something that's different or makes these wines unique is you're not looking for that secondary you have some secondary fermentation in the bottle, but it's not like a traditional method wine like champagne or cava where you have that yeasty development. Here you don't have that yeastiness. It's not as pronounced, that brioche cracker-like note that you would find in the wines.
We can see on the bottle can that the bubble's still hanging out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
exactly.
Serious action going on there.
And so this is a wine, too, something to consider when you're buying pet-nats is supply chain and keeping it cold throughout the supply chain. They ship it cold, and sometimes it'll even say that on the bottle, is to make sure that you keep it cold. Don't put it in your cellar. Don't let it warm up to room temperature. You get it home, you put it in the fridge.
There you go. Really good advice, smart advice. I wouldn't have known to do that. So with your pet-nats, keep them in the fridge, right out of the case when you bring it home. This one's lovely, too. We're lucking out.
It is.
This is a pretty good tasting so far.
Well, and you think about Cabernet Franc as a grape variety.
Love it.
Yeah, and it's so perfect in the Finger Lakes, one of our signature red grape varieties. And same thing from Long Island as well, is you get a little bit of texture and tannin from this wine. So you got bubbles, but you also have tannin. So you can do some really fun, as we're approaching summer, barbecue with this wine would be beautiful. Some nice grilled chicken, ribs, nothing too spicy, unless you really wanted to, but I don't do spice much.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But that's why I just think it's really enjoyable.
And so this, just to reiterate, this is from the North Fork of Long Island, right? So this is a temperate, oceanic type area that's very much different from here. We're several hundred feet higher up in the woods.
Yes,
Yeah.
but they have a longer growing season
Got it.
down on Long Island. So that's why you see more Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc being grown there. It's because of those extended growing days.
Perfect. Lovely wine. Moving right along.
Yes.
What's next on our list?
Okay.
So this is the Christian Binner Eros de Raphael Le Pirouette. What are we getting into here?
Look at this color.
Yeah.
Look at the color. And we were talking a little bit about this beforehand. Where would a restaurateur put this on the wine list? Is this a white wine? Yeah. Is it a rosé? It's really in the orange wine category. And what some restaurateurs have done is kind of group these with rosés, because if a guest ordered this and wasn't familiar with the wine and were expecting a white wine, they would look at it and be like, no.
This looks like red grapefruit juice.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But we also notice that it is very cloudy.
Yep.
This wine is also unfined, unfiltered. And looking at the wine, it's Pinot Gris, Riesling, and Sylvaner. So grape varieties that we so much associate with white wines. Now, Pinot Gris is a grape variety that does like to mutate. And you will find Pinot Gris around the world that have a pinkish, reddish hued skin. And so this wine has done 25 days of skin contact. And that's where we're getting the color from. But then also aged on lees for 8 months. And aging on lees for 8 months is not crazy. We see Sauvignon Blancs and Muscadets from the Loire Valley being aged on lees for that long as well. So the differentiator in this wine is really the skin contact for 25 days.
You know, I think for this one, this is the wine that was supposed to line up with the Pinot Grigio Ramato, right? The Italian. I just had that fairly recently. Last year was the first time I kind of had those, right? Those Pinot Grigios that are a little off orange, and they're just delicious.
And isn't it fun because they add texture?
Yes.
Because often, and I don't want to say, there are some Pinot Grigios in the market that taste like water.
Yes.
They have no character. And with that Ramato, it just ups the character a little bit to make it really like, ooh, wait, what's going on in this wine? And beautiful with fish.
This one's got a heck of a nose.
Peach skin.
Yeah.
I mean, dry peach skin, orange peel. And I think what's so important to note on the palate is the texture of this wine.
Yep. Not very acidic, not very biting. It doesn't really hit you too hard. It's laying off actually quite a bit.
But it has what's funny is the acidity is kind of competing against that tannin that you're getting from the grape skins.
Yep.
And oftentimes people say, oh, well, white wines don't have tannin.
Yeah.
They can in this case. And then, I mean, of course, they can get it from wood tannin as well. But just, this is, you think about drinking a rosé. A rosé has that texture and tannin, and this is just a white wine that has texture and tannin.
Did we talk about where this is from in France? Do we know?
Oh, this wine is from Alsace.
Okay, so there we go. Mountainous, eastern France.
Yes, eastern France. Longer growing season, drier area, so the fruit can get really ripe here, but still maintain their acidity because of the northerly climate.
So other wines that we might associate with Alsace would be the Pinot Blanc is grown up there, Rieslings.
Pinot Blanc, Rieslings, Gewürztraminers, always fan favorites. I love Cremant Alsace, which is a sparkling wine made in the traditional method. Delicious.
Right, on the money.
Yeah, and this is fun because it's an association of wine growers, as they call themselves, but grape growers and winemakers that have come together to make many, many different styles of wine from the area.
This one was lovely.
And also zero sulfur. So there is zero sulfur in this wine, kind of going back to how people associate natural wine starting. Very, very much hands-off.
It's lovely. Next, we take a detour to Italy, Il Censo Cattarato. What's going on with this wine?
This wine is even more orange than the Alsace.
It's iridescent.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Alsatian wine is kind of like a peachy, cloudy. This is like spot on orange. And I think what's also important to note is when we opened up the bottle, there was a lot of sediment in the wine.
Oh yeah, visible. Looking through this one, little black,
chunks,
little dark chunks. Yeah, suspended.
If you know that you're, expecting that in the wine, great. That's fine. Again, adds a little bit of texture.
Sure.
If you're poured the wine and you're not expecting it, be like, what is this?
Yeah.
And that's, education. It's education of the people selling in the retail stores, the distributors, everyone needs to be educated in order to properly enjoy, well, I know not necessarily properly enjoy the wine, but manage expectations.
I think so too, right? I mean, it might be a little much to say that wine sellers should issue a caveat with some of these, but frankly, they kind of should.
Right. Yeah,
right?
and there's no requirements from labeling.
Right. right.
So it's dealing with what you see in the bottle, and with some natural wine producers looking at alternative packaging like bag-in-a-box, you can't actually see the wine, so you wouldn't know that it had skin contact or it was unfiltered and having sediment at the bottom.
What do you think of this one?
Well,
Let's check it out.
I mean, Colorado as a grape variety produces full-bodied, not overly intense, fairly medium intensity aromatics, even to, some people even describe it as low, used in Marsala production. But that grape variety is making some really interesting white wines from Sicily. Mm-hmm. And we see being blended with Griot or Chardonnay as well. But this one has a little bit more earthiness on it, and we haven't even talked about Brettanomyces in
you nodded toward
wines.
it early, yeah. So tell us about Brett.
Brett, yes. Brettanomyces is a wine that, again, depending on how much Brettanomyces is in a wine, can be seen as adding a little bit of complexity, or can be a straight fault. Once a winery is infected with Brett, very, very hard to get out.
Yeah.
But some producers, like some cider producers, love Brettanomyces in their wine. Mm-hmm. And Brettanomyces, it's sweaty horse.
Yeah, barnyard.
Barnyard, often described. For those of you that are old enough to remember the metal boxes for like Band-Aids or adhesive bandages, that it gets that rubbery smell and fun. But this wine, dried orange peel. Mm-hmm. Like there is a dried fruit character. While this wine is young, it's not, I would say, described as like fresh. There is a little bit of a dried note to it.
Like the dry garnishes at a bar. You get the little orange. It's kind of like that orange that you get in that you're not supposed to.
But even like a smoked, some cocktail bars are taking it, dehydrating the oranges and then smoking it a little bit.
Sure, yeah. That's kind of what we're getting here. Yeah. I'm a little bit more challenged by this one than maybe the others.
Yes.
I want to like it, but I'm not sure I'm there.
It's not as forthcoming in the glass.
What about the fruitiness? How would you?
It doesn't have much.
No.
At all.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And that's why I went down that dried orange peel note.
Yeah.
Because you don't get a lot of fruit from this.
Where did it go? Like in the process, how do you end up here, right?
Well, skin contact, aging.
That's the thing, right?
Yep.
The skin contact.
And this is a 2019. So it has a little bit of bottle age to it.
Right. Speaking of aging, we talked about this a little bit. You were talking about, whether to cellar or how to store it. But what about the relative age? I mean, we've got some that are, the oldest one is this one, right?
Yeah.
So you only have a few years, right, with these?
I would say
wines?
1 to 3 years.
Okay.
Yep. As you think about how a wine evolves, you have the fresh fruit, and then the secondary, those earthy characters, and then tertiary. So
yep.
It's on your, oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, there are some natural wines that start much more earthy. And so you don't have the fruit character in it. Gets covered up because of the method of production, or if, say, for example, Brettanomyces.
Perfect. You are a certificate author for several online courses related to a lot of what we're talking about here, wines of Italy, wines of France, and wines of the world. Tell us a little bit about what's involved in the creation of those courses, what your desired outcomes and objectives are for the learners and people who are with us today.
Really to go on a wine journey that lasts a lifetime.
Yeah.
Something about wine is that every year is different. Every vintage is different, so there's so much to learn about, and it can really bring people together. Whether it's learning the material to do business deals, learning the material because it's just something that you are truly passionate about, I think it's so much fun. and you get, we talk culture, we talk food and wine pairing, and then of course, and how the classes are structured too, with the second course being hosting an event of some sort, where again, it's bringing people together to enjoy, and I think that's so important in life.
Perfect. I've always admired your instruction style.
Thank you.
It's great. I just love spending time with you. Is also the case. Okay, let's get back to France. We're going to deal with the Beaujolais now. This is what is considered a Cru Beaujolais. It's called Fleury. What do we know about Fleury?
Fleury is one of the 10 Cru Beaujolais.
Okay.
And Chris, you and I love Beaujolais, Cru Beaujolais.
Gamay grapes.
Gamay grape. Yeah. And so many people write off Beaujolais because they think of Beaujolais Nouveau. And while, hey, I'm all about celebrating Beaujolais Nouveau and the first harvest of the Northern Hemisphere every year once it comes out. It's always at my Thanksgiving table because it tastes like liquid cranberry juice. Cru Beaujolais have aging potential. They are complex wines. And not all Cru Beaujolais are natural, and this is where the producers are so important to understand which wines are more traditional and which wines are under this natural wine movement. And the reason why is partly because of method of production. We talk carbonic maceration. Here, carbonic maceration is how Beaujolais Nouveau is made. The fermentation is so fast. That's how it can get released in November when it's harvested in September. But with the natural, it's hands off, it's whole cluster, including the stems, including the seeds, the skins, literally just putting it in a tank, putting some carbon dioxide in there, having the bottom grapes, break, release their juice, start to ferment, and then you have intercellular fermentation going on as well. And they can be, some producers like a little bit of, and I'm just going to say it, funk to their wines. And that's great in various amounts, and then some are much cleaner. Some producers are much cleaner. Again, all based off of the stylistic preference.
Let's check out this Fleury.
Sure. Color-wise, this wine, no sulfur in this wine.
Good to know.
Minimal sulfur.
Okay.
Minimal sulfur. Mm-hmm. But half of it's done in carbonic maceration to keep it really fruity. And this goes to that glue style. We see this even being done in Spain, where some producers are making Tempranillo or Garnacha with carbonic maceration to keep the alcohol levels low, to make it really juicy and fruity and easy drinking. And then they'll have the oak-aged as well as an extension in their portfolio.
So this one runs at retails in New York at $24.99, I think. Mm-hmm. You can spend a lot of money on a Cru Beaujolais. Yeah? No? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it depends.
We can hit $60, something
yes,
like
but I think $25 is a very fair price.
Yeah, okay, great.
But we're still getting the cranberry, but it's not as juicy cranberry. It's more of a dark cherry. Okay, no influence of oak, but getting some of that whole cluster influence.
I'm not feeling the funk in this one.
No,
No,
it is clean.
Yeah.
But again, this is still considered a natural wine because of the minimal amounts of sulfur that's being used.
Delicious. Tannins right on. Nice and dry. That's lovely. That's a pretty wine.
But still with beautiful acidity.
Yep.
Where the tannin gives it a little bit of texture, and you're still looking for the components of the wine to be there. And I think that's important with all natural wines. You still want acid. You still want tannin or texture of some sort to bring in the whole picture, make it a very balanced wine.
So that does it for our tasting. This has been fun.
It has been.
I've learned a good deal. Any parting words for those who are getting ready to explore further the world of natural wine?
Don't be afraid to ask and do research. This is where I have had conversations with people in the wine world that say natural wines are better than all of the other wines.
Yeah.
I tend to disagree.
Sure.
I think natural wines is a stylistic preference of the winemaker. And just like some winemakers use 100% new oak and some winemakers only use 50% new oak, as a consumer, being able and knowledgeable enough and comfortable and confident enough to ask those types of questions to the retailer, to your sommelier, to find the best wine that's right for you at the right occasion.
Again, no mainstream appeal here. Probably will never be the case. You have to be an active participant, effectively to enjoy these and, make the right decisions around them.
Right, and these all are wonderful. I mean, especially the pet-nats, good ones to kind of start experience the category. 680 Cellars here in the Finger Lakes. They also have a lot of really interesting pet-nats of different grape varieties that you might not necessarily know. The orange wines, just going into them knowing, okay, this wine is going to be different. This is not going to be a Pinot Gris, and just approaching the wine with an open mind. And then exploring reds, very, very different types of reds, a lot with the carbonic maceration, and if you get wine that has a little bit of Brett, if you like it, great. If you don't, okay, just know that you don't like that style. But something to note in terms of service is going from a wine that's very bretty, not bready, but bretty, and then going to a wine that does not have Brett, it could influence your perception of the next wine. So you need to have some sort of cleanse in between. And reusing a glass from a bready wine to a non-bready wine, it will contaminate the glass.
Good to know. Good advice. Hey, we're doing this again next week.
Yes.
We have a podcast next week recording where we're doing appellations, designations, and geographical indications, and new wine laws.
Oh boy, it is going to be so much fun to talk about what's going on in the wine world because things are changing.
That's right. All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. This has been a lovely tasting. Cheryl Stanley, it's always a pleasure to have you in.
Thank you, Chris.
See you next time.
Bye.